Welcome back to Business Today. Right now we're moving on to the market discussion segment right now. And today for our market discussion segment, we are actually talking about entrepreneurship and actually focus a little bit about the platforms available for Sri Lankan entrepreneurs to actually grow their businesses and maybe actually see the way forward. If you're interested in doing a startup, if you have an SME or a small or medium enterprise, how to grow it, how to sustain it. We'll talk all about that with the industry insider. We have an entrepreneurial specialist here with us he's actually working as an entrepreneurial specialist as well right now at the USAID project, Youlead, and of course, he is a director at HubPoint. Yes. We have Mr. Talal Rafi with us. Mr. Rafi, now starting off, I think we want to talk about the Sri Lankan entrepreneurship culture, right? So in your view, what is the status of entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka?
So if you talk about entrepreneurship, the stage in Sri Lanka, so we are at, like when you compare to other regions, we are at a more like a beginning stage, I would say, as a whole, if you talk about the ecosystem. Because like when you see formally, like countries like Vietnam, Thailand go for like 20% of their population are entrepreneurs, but in Sri Lanka it's at 3%. So there is a lot to go. So when you look at it through like the McKinsey indicators, like for example, ecosystem, finance, culture. So in all three areas, there is a lot of potential for improvement. For example, in the ecosystem, like we could do a lot more in like the support system, like in the form of something like a mentoring platform and other areas like policy. And in finance, it's more like, even if you see like most of the investments are like asset-based loans, we could push it more towards cash flow. And even in Colombo, there's a lack of like venture capitalism. Like there is, but it's still at a beginning stage. And we need to bring in a lot of like angel investors into the country. So, and the other one, finally, like to go brief, culture as well. So we need to like change the culture more towards entrepreneurship.
In your view, like how much is entrepreneurship actually accounting for Sri Lankan economy in this sense?
So, I mean, entrepreneurship accounts in the biggest way in the economy, but like formally only 3% are entrepreneurs. Yeah. Like on a, so these 3% basically sustain the entire system. Yeah. So if you see people work in the public sector and in the private sector. So the private sector, the balance 92% work for, you know, companies owned by these three, the 3%, yes.
Now, moving on to the next question. You know, what are the challenges now? Of course, you mentioned a little bit about the lack of education, lack of sometimes funding. Yes. Those are the main challenges, or are there any more?
There are a lot of challenges. Like, for example, if you see, one of the challenges is access to finance. So even if you see in Colombo, there is like, now only there's a beginning towards venture capitalism and angel investments. So we're trying to like improve that. So through, I would say the SME board of the Colombo Stock Exchange is a very good move. And other challenges, I can say, when you look at the ease of doing business, the World Bank report, we rank as 99th in the world. So when you're a foreign investor and you're looking at this country, and there is like immense potential, like there's so many opportunities in this country, but then when he sees the report and he sees 98 other countries which are better than him, that the first impression doesn't go well. And one of the areas I find like very challenging, even for companies trying to get local investors, is like when it comes to enforcing agreements, according to the World Bank, we are 162nd in the world. So this is like really bad. So when two companies have a legal agreement, or two businessmen, let's say a foreign investor and a local company, so there's something goes wrong in the contract and they go to courts, it takes 4 years. So, and a lot of capital expenditure on the court cases. So these are like a lot of challenges we would face, I would say. Yeah, to round it off, like 3 key areas which I'm involved in trying to fight this is like, one, I'm working through the USAID project, Youlead. So we are trying to create a mentoring platform, which I can talk on. And the other area would be to create like an ecosystem. So at the Right now, it's like at a university stage through Moratuwa. So we're creating an incubator. And the third thing is trying to broaden the SME board of the Colombo Stock Exchange.
And now, you actually mentioned on the top of the program about, when you're an entrepreneur, the challenges you face. And you mentioned that one of the ways forward is the mentorship.
Yes.
So what is a mentor for an entrepreneur?
A mentor is not someone who directly gets involved and solves your problem, but he is like someone who gives an overview, someone you meet like once a month. So this we feel would help a lot, because a lot of young entrepreneurs, like when you take really young, they take a lot of emotional decisions. So one day something goes wrong in their business, and then they're heat of the moment they do something. Or if they're too happy, they jump into another project. And let's say they don't have knowledge or experience about financial products. So a mentor could guide them through this. Because when we did our study through Youlead, the USAID project, we found that even established startups, like companies, which are have run into 5 years, have a failure rate of 50%. But with successful mentoring, it comes down to 30%. So when you see you can nearly save half of the businesses, even Facebook, Zuckerberg had a mentor, Steve Jobs was his mentor. So let's say he started in 2004. By 2009, he was having a mentoring session. So if not for Jobs, we could even lose Facebook. That is the scale of the importance of mentoring. So from our project perspective, we did this study, and we are developing a platform which would be on a national scale. So we're going to have a lot of mentors, and any entrepreneur in Sri Lanka could go to the online platform and we would provide a mentor.
So this is from the USAID?
Yes, this is from the USAID project.
I think that's a great initiative, because in Sri Lanka, the ecosystem is maybe different from other countries. Yes. So someone who has been through that actually guiding you. Now, apart from that, I think a lot of work is done now. Of course, the biggest criticism of entrepreneurship actually levies at the academics is, hey, you guys are not cultivating the entrepreneurship style in your universities. Right. You're making people who are stamping people who are made to be badges for the industries. You don't cultivate free thinkers, you don't cultivate economy in the sense. Right. So what is, actually I know for a fact that you are part of an exciting initiative to actually change that. Can you actually expand on that?
So I'm also working as an industry expert at Moratuwa University. So it's part of a World Bank project funded by the World Bank. And so they are, as I'm also a member of their operations committee, so we are trying to look at commercializing final year projects. So we find that for a year, around 600 projects from Moratuwa University come out. So most of these are geared towards academic achievements. So what we found was there are brilliant ideas which, if commercialized and given proper incubation, these could be the next big companies. Some of the ideas which I cannot disclose have the potential to become billion-dollar companies and immensely improve the growth of Sri Lanka.
I think we've seen this example around the world. For example, FedEx was actually a term paper.
Yes.
And now, I think going from that, I think I'll actually ask you to expand on a little bit on that topic. Do you believe that we can actually incorporate some entrepreneurship style education into our education system, in the sense secondary level or tertiary level?
Yes, sure. That would be a great initiative, because even with the university, now we are more encouraging that whole thing. So with the incubator, we are providing everything from legal service, financial advisory, industry level thing where I'm involved in, and even market research, marketing. So we want to give a proper mini ecosystem inside the university. And why I find working with Moratuwa University is beneficial for Sri Lanka is that I find the potential that we could create an ecosystem around the university. For example, if you see what are the most successful ecosystems in the world, you would take Silicon Valley and Boston. And if you ask, they have produced a lot of revenue, yeah, and GDPs and big companies. But they're fired up by Stanford and MIT. So those are the things, like Stanford fires up Silicon Valley. Like about 39,000 companies have been formed out of graduates from Stanford. So which created around $2.7 trillion in revenue. So we're talking about and 5.4 million jobs. This is what Stanford brought to Silicon Valley, and MIT did the same thing to Boston. So with the amount of talent, like when you're talking about Moratuwa University, you find them doing it like trying to control traffic through AIs. These are some of the projects, and virtual reality, drone technology, and even like trying to turn engines into like electric cars, like the conversion process. The normal engines into electric engines. So these are like major projects which I see as a great potential, and I mean, this might take a couple of decades, but we could create a sort of a mini Silicon Valley around the university.
West Coast, East Coast, I know it's like great universities actually banding together. And now I'll move away from that aspect into the financial aspect now, we talked about in the earlier segments when it comes to the challenges the entrepreneurs face. Now, one of the ways they go about this is getting seed money or actually getting into the stock market.
Right.
So in Sri Lanka, are there avenues, what are the avenues available for young entrepreneurs to get the financial help they need?
Right. So in this area, like I find the initiative of the Colombo Stock Exchange to form an SME board, small medium enterprise board, as a great initiative, because I'm like in the soon to be formalized advisory council. So I'm a part of it, and we're trying to work to improve it. So we see that they have a minimum stated capital of 25 million rupees for a company to list in it. And this I feel is a great initiative, because when you look at like this improves the access to finance, like when it comes to like angel investors and venture capitalists, because when you look at how a venture capitalist invests, like while investing, he looks at an exit strategy. So if I'm a startup, I can go and pledge to him like in a year or two, I'm going to do an IPO, and then he can get his money and move out. So this we feel is like it's going to be a great boost for the economy, and which can attract a lot of angel investments. So I'm trying to bring it from an international like forum as well, as I'm part of, I'm Sri Lanka's representative to the WBF investment forum, which is part of the G20. So I feel like once these are connected with the SME board and the Moratuwa University startups, we could create a more conducive environment.
And apart from that, I think finally to wrap up, how can we actually incorporate I think a boost into the culture of entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka? How can we actually elevate this further? What new initiatives can we bring about?
When it comes to culture, I feel that there is a lot to change. For example, in Sri Lanka, talking on the first thing, like family and society don't encourage entrepreneurship as a whole. Like it's still the culture of like finish your degree and get a 9-to-5 job. So we need to like change the perspective and get people to see entrepreneurship as a more successful venture. So I feel like we should give out a lot more success stories, which we are also doing through our USAID project. And the other thing is like here we see failure as a bad thing. Like if you go to like Silicon Valley and Boston, like failure is not looked down at. Like someone can have a startup fail 2 to 3 times and then still get investment. So
failure is actually an opportunity.
It's more like they don't call it failure, they call it experience.
All right, Talal, thank you for joining us.
Right.
That is Talal Rafi. Great ideas about entrepreneurship. And with that, we will be winding up today's edition of Business Today. Do join us next time. Till then, it's good night.